Indeed. Hi.
Okay, yeah, I'll move to it.
But yeah, it was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't think they'd make it out the other end of it, so I thought that was just be a hard no. I'm gonna treat this like see what the CPAC meeting, so everything's on lockdown. All right. Good. I want to thank everybody for coming today. Welcome. In case you're not sure, this is the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force meeting. Also, I just wanted to let everybody know we have a group, at least one person, maybe a group out there that think it's funny to hijack our meetings. It happened last week with the General Plan Advisory Committee, and it was exactly the same as the hijacking that took place at the Lucerne Senior Center meeting for the Lucerne Castle. Someone will come in and either in a meeting, like a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar when it's kind of it's run a little loosely as far as giving people access. As far as being an attendee versus a panelist, we were trying to engender more free-flowing discussion style at our last General Plan Advisory Committee meeting, and they used that opportunity to go in and hijack the meeting, which I don't know how they do that. But it's taking over the audio and then showing their favorite porn, which apparently they're not refreshing it very often because it looked exactly the same as what we saw months ago at the Lucerne Senior Center. So anyway, there's this party out there that just wants to be disruptive of community development meetings. And so going forward, if you will notice, especially if you're attending in the Zoom room, we're going to keep you as an attendee and be very selective as to who we move into the panelist status so that we can avoid or hopefully support this group in the future so we can get stuff done. There, sorry that was a little bit TMI, but just so you know. Ruby, would you go ahead and call roll call?
Yes. Catherine Vanderwall here. Nara Gilbaga. Rebecca Harper here. Jennifer Smith, not present. Fire District Representative.
Paul Blues, Kelsey Fire.
Thank you. And William Wise.
Present.
Richmond Kelly.
Present.
And then Robert Curie.
Have you heard from any of the other people who are absent right now? Okay.
Nara had noted that she wouldn't be here.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she's in Las Vegas.
Oh, right. Okay. And the other people may happen along since we're in a new location today. Right. So thank you for your flexibility. I think they're doing some testing upstairs right now. So they called it something. Next, we'll move on to consideration of minutes from April 22nd, 2024.
No, we can't approve any of these minutes.
No minutes? Okay, we're tabling them all.
But was Richmond, were you here at our last meeting?
Yeah.
You were?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, I just didn't remember that.
Okay.
Wanted to confirm.
He was here at the last meeting?
Yeah.
Pretty sure, because I had the whole.
Yeah, because I talked to
I didn't have a beard in the meeting. There's a lot more hair right now, but.
Excellent. He was marked here though, right?
It was a meeting before that I was.
I just wanted to confirm, I, for some reason, did not remember that.
Excellent. So then, yeah, right? Consideration of 73.3 general requirements. Property owners approval. The task for staff was to consult or confer with county council regarding whether or not we could require property owner approval and if it would be binding regarding tax collection purposes. So Michelle, go ahead and let us know what you found out.
Yes, of course, I'm getting this in a little depth, but that's okay, remember. So essentially, Nicole, County Council was saying that it appears like we were potentially trying to regulate tax payment through the use permit process, but they're separate. Of course, they're sort of interrelated with, you know, us requiring that people pay their taxes on that, but she said we can't, but long story short, no. something like that would not be legally binding, and that, the tax office, should go about, revising their ordinance to have those mechanisms in there in the event that someone were to default a permitting on the taxes, is the short story. And that last thing, that if we wanted to try to regulate that a little bit more, perhaps we could look at the background clearance stuff to add. I can't remember what's already on there, but to add anything related to like tax evasion or any sort of crimes like that that have already occurred potentially in someone's background. And I don't know if those already are included off the top of my head.
We use the criteria that the state uses.
Yeah. So she said perhaps we could add, you know, more specific stuff related to like fees and finances and tax collection.
So, okay, so then that would require changes in, it would require us to then add to the list, possibly over and above what the state is already requiring, which.
Yes.
Okay,
If I could ask a question.
hold on a second, Michael, we'll open it up for public input in just a minute. Did the task force have any further questions regarding what we found out from staff, from county council?
So the whole point of that was to link it so they could collect taxes that were being collected by.
Yes, the treasurer tax collector was having an issue with property taxes, or with the cannabis taxes not getting paid by a permittee, and then the permittee skips town or leaves. And so he was having trouble, and so that was the discussion around that, was connecting or requiring an owner to be a co-applicant, which actually has implications at the state level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she reminded me that as soon as the use permit's issued, it really stays with the land, not necessarily the person, which gets tricky with cannabis, just because there are additional implications for that, but I'm trying to see.
Right, so it does not look then as though a modification in this section of the code would accomplish that purpose.
So for clarification though, Michelle, you did state that she thought that something could be worked on through Patrick's office.
Yes, yeah, she said we could refer to the tax ordinance, that's not what it's called, but those regulations, and then that they could tighten those up a bit, like what happens if somebody defaults. She also said that it's not, let's see if I get this right, they're not land taxes, they're either classified as business or personal taxes. Some of you may know that, or you may know that. So it's different than taxing the land, it's like as far as the tax code and regulations go. Yeah, she suggested potentially adding language if we wanted to, who can apply essentially, and whether or not they have tax crime related issues.
Are there any further questions from the task force? Not, we'll open it up to public. Go ahead.
So I brought, well.
Can you please state your first name?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Michael Wagner. So Janae Free was from the State Water Resource Board. I pointed out that she was in attendance last time, and I've been emailing back and forth with her, and she made a comment to me that in regards to holding the property owner liable, that is how the State Water Resource Board already works. So if the grower skips town, anything they've done, whether it be fees, penalties, all that stuff goes back to the property owner. So they may have some, whether it's a mechanism or a specific way that they're going about doing that. I think following suit might be a great way to give ourselves a way to mechanicize what we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further public input on this item? If not, we'll bring it back to the task force.
No hands raised.
No hands raised in Zoom. What is the will of the task force?
So, Catherine Nickel, is Patrick, has he been made aware of this? Or this possibility?
You know what, he was not, I can forward it to him.
I would like to kind of hear his take on that before we go further as far as evaluating what our next steps would be. To kind of hear back from him on this.
Okay. Is it the will of the task force then to table this item to our next meeting? Where we can, and we will reach out to Patrick and see if he has any comments he'd like to send in, or if he'd like to join us at our next meeting.
It seems incredibly complicated, what we're talking about. As soon as you add an owner, landowner onto that, that changes a lot of.
It does change a lot, because then that owner becomes subject to the same background check requirements.
I'd like to need more information on this part.
No problem, we can table this to the next meeting.
Maybe, is that something that's appropriate to invite council to, or is that not?
Not county council, let's just invite Patrick to send comments or to join us at our next meeting. Okay, on to the next one, background checks and clearances. Qualifications for minor or major use permits. Now, when I was reviewing this in preparation for the meeting, format-wise, this got a little confusing for me because it's not limited to background checks. It's almost like its own section, which I think maybe it is, in its own section in the zoning ordinance. If you could check that real quick, that'd be great. So because it doesn't just have to do with background checks, it has to do with more of denying a permit up front or denying a renewal of a permit, neither of which are specific to background checks. So there were, 3 reasons listed? And actually, failure to comply with the provisions of the chapter of the zoning ordinance, and especially in relation to protection of natural resources, is something that would get someone on a revocation list anyway. I don't know that and there are already findings in the minor use permit article of the zoning ordinance that require the planning commission to make the finding that there aren't any code violations on that parcel already. So they wouldn't be able to approve it up front or for the first time with this anyway, but it's already listed elsewhere in our code. And then the second one, failed to provide information required by the zoning ordinance, means that their application isn't complete in the first place, so it would not be going up for planning commission approval. And then the third one, the conviction of an offense, blah, 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 the whole list, is a background check. And while I was away, there was a lot more pressure to push these permit applications through. That ended up being one of our conditions of approval, that you have to pass that, but we fixed that now. And that is a completeness item. So there's no way it's gonna get to the planning commission without this already being done. And the ones that have, that you know, we're, as we find out, if we had not gotten them yet, we're definitely getting caught up on that too. So I have one potential revocation that's going to the planning commission that I'm just waiting, because he turned in his background check like this last April. And so depending on how that comes, it will affect the staff reports, because it's not worth our time to process an application for somebody who can't pass the background check anyway. So all of these are either covered in different areas of the zoning ordinance. Hey, Jennifer, you didn't have a chair. Or are incomplete items. So I'm not sure what the, I don't see that we would be in any weaker of a position if we just struck this whole section, but it's totally up to what the task force wants to recommend.
So, Catherine, so you're saying because this language is essentially elsewhere in that permission process. Mm-hmm. So it's basically it's redundant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the grounds for revocation requests is that they've been doing something damaging to the environment. It's a whole list of things.
So who's they?
The permittee.
Okay. And so because Richmond kind of brought it up, and I think we've had this discussion before, but I don't recall. So the background check is for the
owners of the permit and employees.
But the permit stays with the land.
Yes.
So there's a conflict there, because what if you have somebody that comes in, does business, a year later, they're like, oh, I'm gone. But then the property owner still holds that permit, because they own the land. See, I feel like we've had this discussion before.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because this is one way that cannabis permits are very different from our normal use permits.
Right.
Normal use permits follow the land, and if there's a change of ownership, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But in cannabis specific use permits, if there's a change of ownership of that permit, which is not necessarily the landowner, then we have to have proof that new permittee has passed the background check. That's a requirement. And so, yeah, this is one instance where cannabis permits are very different from all of our other discretionary use permits. So we do have an issue. We have encountered a few administrative wrinkles as time has gone on, because people who have been issued permits either no longer want to lease that land and they'd like to just get their permit cut off, and we don't have a mechanism to just quit a permit, because we've never had to do that before. We just rely on the 2-year non-use revocation or non-use expiration. But so we have encountered some instances that we'll bring to the task force for your recommendations in the future, just to sort of address some cannabis specific related challenges that we've experienced administratively. Yeah. Does the task force have any questions about the items that are highlighted under qualifications for a minor or major use permit? Those 3 different things that I just covered. If not, we'll go to public. Yeah, go ahead. Could you state your first and last name, please, so the Zoom people know who you are?
Hi, my name is Tom Lisick. I just had a couple of questions. You mentioned that if the permittee changed, and all that, those mechanisms require background check. My question is, what if your employees change?
Currently, employees are required to have background checks. However, the task force has been talking about recommendations specific to that as well.
Okay, so, yeah, so I understand if the owners change and things like that, but if their employees change, would we
Which
still
is
want to have?
common.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Would we want to have a background check for them?
Yes, that is currently required.
Right.
And then it is double checked by our staff that go perform site visits. We get a list of their employees beforehand and just make sure, double check that we've got background checks on all of them.
My second question is excluding the licensed third-party contractors. How is that handled as far as making sure they would, even though that maybe they don't go through the sheriff's department, what's the mechanism to make sure that
Which section are you looking at? Because I don't see licensed third party
Looking
in
at
the
section-
qualifications.
Section 2715, part-time employees excluding licensed third-party contractors?
So we already took action on that section. We're actually going over here. Qualifications for a minor and major use permit.
What page?
That is page 19, and thank you very much, Ruby, for paginating our.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Are there any other public input? No hands raised. Okay, then we'll bring it back to the task force for discussion. Everybody at once. Are there any recommendations that the task force would care to make about this particular section? And again, your options are always, we recommend the following amendments. We do not recommend, we have no recommendations in which just let it stay the same, or I think that's about it.
Rebecca Harper. So my only maybe point that we might discuss is I understand the reasoning with 1 and 2 that those may be included elsewhere and aren't necessarily relevant to this section. But we may consider keeping number 3. Just, I mean, it is a background check section and might add value to folks reviewing the section just as to why their permit may not be approved related to background checks. I mean, the applicant, owner, or permittee has been convicted of an offense that is substantially related to the qualifications, etc. I don't know, if anything, I would maybe consider keeping that.
Well, one thing we may consider is right here in the beginning that Tom, right? That Tom was pointing out or referring to it doesn't say, it says you shall undergo a background check. It doesn't say you actually have to pass it. We may want to just fine tune the wording there.
Well, it says an individual may fail the background check if employee has been convicted of an offense. Right after that.
Mm-hmm.
So that implies that you would have to pass it. Well, if you can fail something, then you have to be able to pass it as well.
Right, it does not say failure of the background check
Right, so
constitutes
we may
something.
want to amend this language to just.
So, yeah, so, okay, I can see how it relates to that section. So qualifications for a minor and major use permit would be failing
Right.
the background check.
Yeah, and then it provides reasons for which you may fail the background check.
Okay, so one option then is to just take out number 1 and 2, but leave the third one. In which case, then it would fit nice and neatly in the background check section. Yeah, because it directly pertains only to background checks.
And you may or may not also eliminate the title of that section, qualifications for a major use permit. Because it's, I mean, that doesn't encompass all of the requirements.
Just make it a section 2.
And just have section 2 that states that explicitly, reasons for why you might fail background check and how they're reviewed, etc.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll make a motion to remove numbers 1 and 2 from the qualifications for a minor or major use permit section and keep section 3 while also removing the title qualifications for a minor or major use permit.
I'll second it.
Wait, if you remove the title, then it falls under
Previous one.
application, which I don't know that, sorry.
You could amend that to say application and qualifications for background clearance.
That was a supervisor, I did not put them straight.
You could amend the title of that section to be application and qualifications for background clearance for a county.
Okay.
Then you would have number
Is that
1.
all in your amended motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can say it again if you want, but that's good.
For Ruby's benefit.
Okay. I move to remove number 1 and 2 from the section qualifications for a minor or major use permit, but keep section 3, and also remove the title qualifications for a minor or major use permit and amend the title of section 1 to state application and qualifications for background clearance for a county permit.
Do we have a second?
Second.
By Paul, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're up to 6 now, right? And are there anyone against? Okay, great, thank you.
Maria?
Yes.
Did you already close public comment for this item?
Yes.
Okay.
Complaint records, next section. Oh, you know what? I thought we just had no recommendation. Oh, no recommendations or motions made. Okay, so that doesn't mean it's still on our agenda. That means we had no recommendations for changes, correct? The permittee shall maintain a record of all complaints and resolution of complaints and provide a tally and summary of issues in the annual performance review report. That was my understanding, but it was still on our agenda, so to me it looked like we hadn't quite made any decision on it.
We're on section K.
Page 22. Okay, where it says no recommendations or motions made.
Because we already made it.
Well, I think we actually decided, or I think y'all decided that there weren't any recommendations to make, that it was fine just the way it was, right? So I just wanted clarification, or did we not address it at all?
No, we did. We suggested to move it to 7 years.
Yeah, we did. We did.
That's new language.
Yeah.
Where's the 7 years? I don't see anything. I'm looking at K, complaint reports. I think tallying them only once every 7 years makes a difference.
Page 22.
To way down toward the bottom.
Sorry.
Where it just says permittee shall maintain a record of all complaints and resolution of complaints, provide a tally and a summary of the issues in the annual performance review report.
And then so this, the no recommendations motion made, or no motion made, that just means like there wasn't any recommendations brought up, but there wasn't a motion made to actually keep.
Okay,
It's not that it's a joint list.
all right.
So wouldn't that just fall under activity records
It is.
in general? And so then it would go back to F, which is, and this was the part that we were gonna maybe look at combining all of these into activity records.
Well, it's K, so that means it's just under one of the general requirements, but it's a standalone.
Right, but if one of the conversations we did have in here was to move all of these G, H, I, J, K under
Activity
F,
records.
yeah, in general. And if you did that from a formatting perspective, then that would cover the 7 years of life of the permit.
7 years. Oh,
That's
okay, I
under
see, yeah. Oh, maintaining the records of 7 years of life of the permit. Okay, but what about the providing a tally and summary of issues in the annual performance review report?
Yeah, so I think the conversation we had before, as Jennifer mentioned, was just to make these all subsections of F.
Okay,
So that, because that way, everything stated in A, B, C, and D, A, B, C, D, and E under F also apply to G, H, I, J, and K.
all right, and no changes to that particular sentence were recommended.
Correct.
Okay, good, so let's take that one off of our agenda for the future. Or I won't keep getting confused.
But we would still need some sort of action to do that. If that's what we want to do, was combine those.
I think that's on our to-do list already. So, but if y'all want to make a motion that this is to be a subsection of F and no changes are recommended, that would be helpful for clarifying our records going forward.
I would like to make a motion that we reformat so that items that items G, H, I, J, K are formatted to fall under the activity records subsection. Therefore, life of the documents would be changed to 7 years or life of the permit for everything.
Do we have a second? It'll have to come from this room. Okay.
Sorry, Catherine.
Motion.
Just
All right, all those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? That one. Okay, so now we're gonna get into section 73.4 restrictions and prohibited activities. And we do not have the big screen, that's a bummer. Because at our last meeting, we had talked about the Audubon Society giving us a presentation, or maybe it came in afterwards.
Can we actually put it in the packet?
Right, but with, okay, so what we have in your packet then are these really cool slides, very pretty. And also, as public input is the narration with the slides. So.
Miss Donna was going to actually present.
Excellent, and Donna Makowitz from Redbud is ready to make a presentation that is specific to tree removal. So we thought that that would be a very helpful presentation for the task force to take on before we address the tree removal section. You took the narration slide out?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we all have them in our packets though, right? The paper packets? Excellent. So if you wouldn't mind giving Donna about, I think we said 10 minutes, right, Donna?
Yes, I can do it really quickly in 10, maybe 11, but I'll talk real fast.
Okay, I'll give you 11.
You feel free to cut me off. I know your time is valuable.
Can you raise the volume there so we can hear her? All right, Donna, we're just increasing the volume on our laptop so that we can hear you better.
Okay, is this good?
That's good. And let's see what the slides start, I think, after the paginated sections.
Shall I begin?
Okay, are we ready? Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Okay. Donna Mack with Redbud Audubon and Deb Sally from the Sierra Club also helped me put this together. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak for the oak trees and the communities that depend on them. Removal of a healthy tree is contrary to best management practices. Policymakers like yourselves recognize that oaks are keystone species and play a critical role in maintaining the integrity of our ecosystems. All members of the ecological community depend disproportionately on them. Furthermore, maintaining mature woodlands is essential to achieving California's goals for CO2 reduction and the 30 by 30 initiative to protect 30% of the land and water resources by 2020. In this picture, you'll see Katie from the county is in front of this Klaus oak. The U.S. Forest Service Oaks 2040, a study developed to assist planning entities, showed that in the early start of the century, Lake County had about 178,000 acres of oak forests. In 1995, Lake County Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a resolution 95-211 that stated, the county shall support the conservation and management of oak woodland communities and their habitat, which included a plan to monitor oak woodland resources at least every 5 years. We were unable to find evidence that the monitoring has occurred and don't have current figures on the acres of oak woodland still in existence. However, we can certainly assume they've dropped due to the expansion of vineyard operations and other development. Blue oak woodlands are a part of Lake County's tree inventory and need to be protected. This woodland type occurs on a variety of well-drained soils. Blue oak usually is the most abundant, although foothill pine is taller and dominates the overstory. Strands dominated by foothill pines have low blue oak density because of its shade and tolerance. The terrain is hilly and generally dry, and water is unavailable for much of the year. At lower elevations on gentle slopes, these two communities intermix with grasslands, and the shrubs are usually clumped together in full sunlight. District 5 Supervisor Jessica Pieska recently hosted the Tree Mortality and Fire Prevention Town Hall, which was presented by the Lake County Risk Reduction Authority and Tree Mortality Task Force, the latter created recently in response to the existence die-off of so many Lake County trees. Maintaining a healthy oak population is crucial. The Mediterranean oak borer is an ambrosia beetle. It was found infesting several valley oak trees in Napa in 2019 and has now been confirmed in our county. Dr. Jones's presentation can be seen on the RRA webpage. Did you know 326 species are entirely dependent on oaks, and another 229 are rarely found on any other type of tree? 31 different animals feed on tree acorns. Most tree planting mitigations for removal of mature trees are woefully inadequate. Depending on annual rainfall, soil quality, and species, an oak tree that is 12 inches in diameter could be 50 years old and contain 50 pounds of carbon. Since it isn't likely that more than 50% of the seedlings that are planted for mitigation will survive, planting 6 seedlings in mitigation could take 25 years or more to equal that one tree's carbon storage. We need to halt the rise of atmospheric CO2 immediately, not 25 years down the road. Most tree planting mitigations for removal of mature trees, I missed that one. Keeping trees standing is essential for California to reach its climate goals. The California Oak Foundation projects that 1 million acres of oak woodlands will succumb to development over the next 30 years, and 750,000 more acres will be threatened. That's on top of the 39 million acres of oak woodlands we've already lost since 1950. Oaks are long-lived trees. If we assume that our current oak woodlands and forests average 100 years of age, then we can expect to sequester almost 3 million tons of additional carbon a year by protecting and conserving these trees throughout the 21st century. California, despite its large and growing population, has the capacity to significantly enhance its oaks to the point where oak woodlands and forests could sequester 1 billion tons of carbon during this century. A white oak of extreme importance is found on Mount Canocti and High Valley Road. It's the mall oak or dwarf canyon live oak. These oaks are found around the Mary Downen cabin on Mount Canocti, have a very deep penetrating root in its juvenile stage, and it's a very good soil stabilizer and commonly grows on very steep, rocky, and unstable slopes. Another often overlooked, very important plant community that needs protection is chaparral. This amazing environment is threatened. The deep-rooted chaparral woodlands that hold our mountainsides together during rainstorms are being clear-cut at an alarming and increasing rate without regard to wildlife or rare plants that live there. Chaparral is a beneficial native plant community in Lake County. You may already know chaparral occurs only in some Mediterranean climates and only on less than 2% of the Earth's surface. It is in fact one of the rarest habitats on Earth. Chaparral has uniquely evolved over time to provide almost unmatched benefits. It supports hundreds of plant species that control erosion, protect people from landslides and flooding, something to keep in mind because even when there is no rain in sight, when it does rain, the rains will be powerful. Until that time, chaparral plants are extremely important. Alarming headlines around the world are reminding us of the critical linkage between trees, plants, and insects. We have removed more than half of the forests on Earth, and not surprisingly, insect populations have declined, but globally by 45% since 1979. Oak trees are home to 897 species of moths, 33 species of insects. No other tree genus supports so much life, and again, it should be no surprise that with insect declines, there are fewer than 3 billion birds in North America. Across North America, birds are declining rapidly. These are green herons from my backyard. Knowing birds are declining with loss of habitat and warming climate brings to mind that bird watching is a multi-billion-dollar industry and one of the fastest growing nature-based tourism sectors in the world. This spending contributes to local communities and can benefit biodiversity conservation. Each year, over 45 million Americans take part in bird watching, and each year those millions of bird watchers spend approximately $41 billion. Fire has always been part of oak woodlands and forests. Oak woodlands persist because they have adapted to live with fire over thousands of years. One main way that oaks adapt to fire is sprouting. Coast live oaks, for example, can survive crown scorch and then vigorously sprout from their base. Deciduous oaks are not known for their sprouting capability, although studies have found that 3% of burned valley oaks died, even when 85% of the trees were completely top killed. Bark, thickness, and branching habits are also adaptations that protect oaks from fire damage, but sprouting is the one that provides the most competitive edge over conifers. Oak tree soil can also sequester carbon. Soils with high organic content, such as those found in the under canopies, can hold larger amounts of carbon, therefore reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming. Oaks improve air quality by storing carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. The leaves of an oak tree absorb airborne pollutants and reduce water pollution by absorbing fertilizer nutrients, pesticides, and other trace contaminants in soil, allowing compounds to break down slowly and be taken up as nutrients. During rains, oak tree canopies capture and slow rainfall, increasing the amount of time it takes the rain to reach the ground, reducing potential surface erosion, which can impair our waterways. Indigenous Americans widely use oak leaves to wrap their dough for bread making. Acorns are a source of food. 3 days of acorn gathering could result in food stores that would last an entire year. Records show plant part of the oak is found in greater quantities in archaeological sites than any other edible food. We need to think about sustainable foods. Mushrooms and oak trees have a symbiotic relationship that can benefit both organisms. Chanterelle mushrooms are an example of a sustainable food source, but they rely on the oak and the benefits associated with oaks. Oak bark is an astringent, can be used for healing bleeding gums, sore throats, and scrapes and rashes. And Native Americans used the oak bark as chewing sticks to clean their teeth. The tannins leached from acorns, as well as the bark, is used as dye. Pigments can be used to color animal skins, make ceremonial face paints, and tattooing. And tribes use the galls, leaves, and fungi growing on acorns for other medicinal purposes like stopping infection. Being a birder, I just had to slip in another bird slide. Our dabbling wood ducks can be found all year in Lake County and will eat seed, fruits, insects, and other arthropods. But did you know that 89% of a wood duck's winter food is acorns? For nesting, they choose the cavities. And for hunters, the wood duck was chosen as their second favorite to eat, right behind the teal. And did you know that more than 9 out of every 10 terrestrial birds raise their young on insects, mostly the caterpillars, which are rich in fats and proteins? 2,300 species are associated with oaks, and that doesn't include all the fungi or any other bacteria or microorganisms that create the symbiotic home with the oaks. This includes the 38 bird species, 229 bryophytes, 108 fungi, and 1,178 invertebrates, 716 lichens, and 31 mammals. And we invite the task force to be partners in conservation and conserve as many healthy trees as possible. Removal of healthy trees is contrary to best management practices. And thank you, and it's our hope, like many other cities and counties in California, to protect healthy oak tree removals and projects. Thank you, and I hope I did it in 10 minutes.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. That was very good. So, to date, Lake County has not developed a comprehensive oak preservation or any sort of tree preservation plan. So we don't have a clear nexus to draw requirements. So this is one area. However, you'll see in the packet that our former resource planner had put together for us regarding tree removal. There are a number of areas in the general plan and in local area plans that are encouraging the preservation of trees and oak woodlands specifically. And they go about it in a couple different ways. One was when dealing with land subdivisions and parcel maps, not allowing more than a 10% canopy removal of trees. And also clustering your building envelopes away from those trees so that you would be saving as many as possible. Additionally, in the Middletown area plan, they talk about, they go up to 40% of existing trees may be removed, but then there was a 3-to-1 replacement ratio, which I think Donna covered as far as that being insufficient. And additionally, when they go into Riviera's area plan, oak woodlands, they're back down to a 10%, where the oaks are clustered together. Or so no more than a 10% removal. So it's consistent throughout the area plans, and I know that just from what we've been hearing in the community workshops with Lake County 2050, updating the general plan and the local area plans, the conservation of the natural resources that we do have, which I can only assume include oak woodlands, is a theme that resonates throughout all communities. So currently our ordinance just says, it kind of has weak words like removal of these specific true oak species for the purpose of developing a cultivation site should be avoided and minimized. That's very difficult for a planner to assess. And so we have had projects come through over the last few years that we've seen some that move around and avoid taking out trees. We've also seen some that remove acres of trees. And so what's put before the task force today is to figure out where do we want to go from there as specific to cannabis related development. One thing in one of the area plans is it did recognize that that we don't want to remove trees. However, we also don't want to completely prohibit development. So there may be a balance there somewhere.
Just for clarification, are we in public comment?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're still just, we had the presentation from the Audubon Society, but then we'll definitely get to public comment in a minute. Yeah.
One other thing I would add is that as a kind of a common practice and also noted in a lot of bio reports is the 3-to-1 mitigation. So that's what we've been doing at the staff level. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
And I think one of the other pieces of information that wasn't just talked about right now is the 3-year conversion from CAL FIRE. something that was in place as well.
Right, so there's a less than 3 acre conversion of timberland, so that is specific to our timber preservation zone. Though I have seen, in the last few years before I came back, that sometimes that was applied to other areas as well, but to do it correctly, it's limited to timberland preservation zone. One of our sources of frustration though, as staff, is that people would come in with a timberland conversion zone because they basically just wanted to get rid of the trees before they applied for the permit. And so we have been very frustrated and have had conversations with the Department of Forestry regarding that being used as a tool, because usually they'll grant it if people say, oh, I'm gonna put a house here. But what ends up being is they just took out up to 3 acres of trees for a cannabis grow. And so that's been, it's always very frustrated when we can see obviously people playing the system. So we want to sort of tighten that up in the future. Not that it's going to be refused, but we have to just, you know, not have avenues where people can take advantage of a system and just lie to the state and then be like, oh, here's my application. You know, so we really want to update that in the future. So there are a number of things we could do. That I think we could say would be supported by the current general plan and local area plans regarding more stringent wording here than just saying removal of these oak trees should be avoided or minimized. Something that'll really help our planners, both now and in the future, to evaluate a project and say, okay, this looks good, or let's kind of change it a little bit over here so that we're still preserving the oak resources that we have. And it's up to this task force regarding any other trees or like microenvironments that could be possible or proposed for disturbance based on site plan. So I realize this is kind of one of the big ones that we're going to deal with. It would be great to foster some discussion today. It's also fine if we don't come to decisions today. But just sort of hear what people are thinking and get some public input. And then, you know, just like with any other item, if the task force wants to table it, wants to recommend we bring some options, something like that, we're open to that as well.
Is there any part of the county that does not have an area plan that addresses this? Looks like Lower Lake does not.
Lower Lake's it is our oldest area plan, and I'm not certain offhand. So, but if it's not in Catherine's research, it's probably not there.
Okay.
Yeah, she's very thorough.
Okay. And then, can you think of any other area that wouldn't be in here? Or that it's not in here?
We have 8 planning areas, and I'm getting good at remembering all 8 now. Kelseyville's not in here. Upper Lake Concern, is that in here? Yeah, Upper Lake East, Metro 1, 2, 3, 6. So we're missing 2 more that I lied. I can't tell you.
Can you remind
Lower
me?
Lake.
Can you remind me where Spring Valley fits into the area plans?
Spring Valley is technically shoreline communities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Kelseyville's not included here?
I do not see Kelseyville listed here. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, envisioning, we've got Upper Lake East, then shoreline, then shoreline kind of gets a little bit of Clear Lake. Then we've got Lower Lake, Middletown, Cobb. I don't see Cobb Mountain in there.
No.
Kelseyville and Lakeport. Is that 8?
So, Richard and Kelly, I think in regards to the tree removal, we're talking about oaks specifically, I absolutely believe that the removal or alteration should be prohibited. They're irreplaceable, especially at this point in time. We have tons on our property, and every time one goes down, everything around it slowly fades back. It's a big deal, and these oaks really are irreplaceable. So I do feel it should be prohibited to remove them, especially with cannabis. When you don't rely on the soil, you can move things around. That's my thought.
Is there any other task force input? Will?
I have a question.
Say your name.
Sorry, my name's Will Weiss, task force member. My question is, With respect to private property, fire protection, defensible space, and other matters related, are there exceptions to the rules related to oak tree removal that apply to those circumstances or not? I'm not sure if I see that in here. So
we have not dealt with tree removal in relation to fire dangers. Paul, did you have anything you want to add?
So in regards to that, it would be if they were in violation of the defensible space standards. For example, if you had an oak tree and there was a branch growing up against, or the tree itself growing up against the house.
Sure.
Right, so that's kind of a violation. Other than that, I'm trying to recall, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head where it says remove oak trees or reduce the amount of oak trees or anything like that. So it would have to fill into that category where it's directly growing up against the house. It's got branches growing over your chimney, touching the roof, something along those lines. But
so proximity to a structure.
That would pretty much be it, because once you get out of that 0 to 30 feet zone, there's oak trees everywhere. It's just maintaining those ladder fuels. So it doesn't go over directly removing or reducing the amount of trees. It's just the ladder fuels that they're concerned about.
Related question, still Willoway speaking. What about an instance where an oak tree could pose a imminent danger to a structure, not so much in the instance of fire, but like this is not a present situation, but I've heard of situations where, or been involved in situations where a structure could not be insured unless a looming tree were removed. That tree's an oak. Do we just doom someone's house? What is that? What is that like? What are the ramifications of this longer range than just removal for cannabis? Because it seems this is relevant.
This would not apply to somebody's house.
Even if there's a residence on the cannabis property.
It would apply to the cannabis activity.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are a number of permits that do have dwellings that they specify are not part of the project. Okay. And so we do not use, we have no mitigations or conditions regarding anything that's excluded from the project. We do get a number of people calling afraid of a tree on their neighbor's house that might affect them, and that's a civil matter, so we don't get involved in that either.
Is there any other development in the county where it is a hard stop, no removal of trees?
No, because we do not have an oak removal policy yet. Though I have been hoping that we would do it, and I anticipate we will in the future, because it's something that I'd like to see happen. Just because there is, I think we can seek that balance. We don't want to prohibit development. We also need to maintain the ecosystems that take so long to develop within our oak woodlands and affect the environment well past the limits of that oak woodland. And so there has to be a balance in there somewhere. But right now we have nothing. We have should be avoided or minimized, you know, and that's really hard to work with. And so it then falls on the will of the applicant. And so that's why we end up with some projects where you see the canopy kind of goes around a tree or vineyards. You can picture that in your mind too. Beckstoffers has a number of those. But it's really up to the applicant because it's not grounds for refusal or denial. Though I think that over time planners have said, hey, how about we save that tree? So, but that's about the strongest we get.
So Richard Kelly again, it seems like the cannabis industry though, based on my own experience and my own, which is outside of California is quite deep. It seems like we are the perfect industry though, or that industry is because we have the flexibility to move things. Like trees, a big oak tree in cannabis, what's the minimum acreage now for a 20? So you have 20 acres and you can't figure out where to put your 1 acre or less grow site. I mean, without removing big oak trees. It seems like this is a place to do it. That's all.
Public or comment from a committee member. That's easy to say.
There are a lot of
it's easy to say that, but it's very different when you're actually managing a property or developing something to say like, oh yeah, just skip that tree. Like that's just not how that works.
It's priorities.
Right.
Yeah. We're not saying it's easy. None of this is easy, right? That's why we're here. So this is the point.
And not everybody plants above ground. A lot of people do plant in ground.
Or in greenhouses.
There are, if I can add, like into the grading ordinance, first of all of this is fairly outdated, as you know, with a lot of our codes, but there are a couple exemptions for grading for fire breaks specifically. If they do not exceed the criteria for a simple grading permit or remove riparian vegetation, then when you go to the simple grading permit regulations, it specifically says like removal of oak trees that would trigger an impact under public resources code, blah, 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 so.
Another benefit that we have recognized over time but do not have code for is wildland or wildlife corridors. So that is, it became an issue when we were, when Lake County was really focused on developing vineyards, because you just, you know, you coat the hillside with your vineyards and you have all these fences, and without sort of thinking ahead and valuing or prioritizing the preservation of wildlife corridors, that could become a problem. So this is not a cannabis specific issue. This is an ag issue in general. And so, yeah.
I suggest we move it to a conversation about all ag.
Well, we're updating the cannabis policy.
Rebecca Harper, I would just like to hear from the Redwood Audubon Society what they think, you know, would be good as far as, or, you know, kind of just for a reference point, what they would see as agreeable.
Donna's still there? Hey Donna, could you give us some suggestions that the Redbud Audubon Society thinks would be workable in this type of ordinance amendment?
Sure, whenever possible. Of course, we would recommend going around and keeping the oak. If you do have to have mitigation, we suggest just planting the actual Lake County gathered acorns over nursery stock, because nursery stock is where the Moab beetle is really, that's where we bring it back into the county more. And as far as monitoring, best practices would be put that shelter around it, mulch it, put the wire cage underneath, and monitor it and water it for at least 2 years. And then it should be pretty well established. It's good to use a variety of species when you're doing your mitigation plantings. And one of the favorite trees suggested is black oak. It looks like most of our trees are migrating, and I foresee in the future less and less valley oaks, less blue oaks, and it's important to keep what we can right now, mainly because of climate change, not because of habitat removal.
Good.
Does that offer some guidance?
Yeah, that's good. How about the, did you have any questions? Okay. How about there is one wording here that we found in some of the area plans, talking about an effort should be made to preserve individual valley oaks and oak woodlands defined as oaks clustered together with 10% or more canopy cover per parcel. There were some area plans that limited the amount of trees that could be removed from any of those identified oak woodland areas.
That's really hard to address, because we're going to be seeing so many valley oaks destroyed with this new pest infestation.
Mm-hmm. And what was the ratio that you recommended? We've been using 3 to 1, but I thought you gave us a different number.
Well, it looks like 3 to 1 is what most counties are. I believe Napa has it 7 to 1. But of course, being an oak lover, you know me, I'd say do as many as you can. It's just planting the acorns and hoping that they survive is the main goal.
So would you say plant 3 acorns per tree, or how many acorns?
I would probably plant 7 acorns and hope that 3 survived. Again, that acorn has to be protected from being dug up by or eaten by a vole, a mole, or raccoons even will dig them up and eat them. Okay. And once it does start sprouting, then you've got that little sprout where it becomes yummy deer browsing. But it'd be better to start from the acorn than have a possible infected nursery stock, I believe.
Are there any further questions for Audubon Society from the task force? Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
All right, we're still in task force conversation questions before we go to public input.
I just feel like a hard stop on it is aggressive.
Rebecca Harper, I know Jennifer had mentioned earlier maybe moving to like an all ag encompassing ordinance. I think if we were to go that direction, it should probably reflect all development. I mean, because ag is the least impactful when you think about pushing trees out, right? If you push trees out to put in a new subdivision of homes, you have 30 new homes where no carbon sequestration is happening, right? If you push out trees to put in a vineyard or cannabis or walnuts or pears, whatever, that's still happening. So I don't think that, you know, having that only apply to ag industries would really achieve the goal anyways.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna, sorry, Jennifer Smith, if I can just tag on to that. If we're gonna go down this path as a county and reassess what the county wants regarding tree removal for development, then it should be an overall development conversation. You know, all forms of ag are, well, crops at least, they're carbon sequestering. So we're already, you know, adding to that positive nature of a tree. We're not taking away from that. And, you know, with other development, you're creating impervious surfaces which affect groundwater. So I think that this needs to be considered for the county as a whole.
So, and that process could very well be inserted into the Lake County 2050 General Plan and Local Area Plan updates, as well as the agricultural element specifically, and then be mirrored in the zoning ordinance rollout in 2028. So, but that doesn't change the fact that it's here. So we'll want to talk about it.
Jennifer Smith again. I'd like to see these other 3 area plans and perhaps some language developed that the project will adhere to area plan development standards regarding tree removal.
Okay. So then what you're asking is we would table this so that staff could review those missing ones and let you know if there is any input on those, and then consider a motion of changing this wording to reflect what comes out in the area plans, or what is in the area plans. Is there further task force?
That's Jennifer's motion now.
Well, we haven't gotten to public input yet, so hold on to that one. Paul, did you have something?
I'm processing.
Right.
All loose. I think my big thing also is I kind of agree with that and mimicking the area plans, but I also think that there needs to be a number that's put on this, because leaving it up to the discretion, even if you got to somewhere where the area plan doesn't necessarily cover what this removal can be, what percentage or something like that, you could end up having one planner that says, yeah, go ahead and remove all the trees, I don't care. You can have another planner that says, nope, you can only remove 2. Mm-hmm. So you might end up falling into some weird category there. So there should just be some sort of number to fall back on, where there is that cap and that limit to it if the area plan doesn't already address it.
Rebecca, or something like a minimum of 10% unless otherwise specified by the area plan. If that number is higher by the area plan, then
minimum of 10% of overall.
Well, I'm not saying necessarily 10%,
like
8%, blank percent, unless otherwise specified by the area plan.
Right.
The intent of that would be that blank percent is the minimum percent, and then if the area plan specifies a higher percent, that's what you would have to adhere to. I think that kind of reflects Paul's sentiment.
Yeah.
And Catherine Vanderwall, I just want to add something in there because I don't know that it's going to even be addressed in the area plans.
I don't know either. That's my next mental note.
Because we have the Mediterranean outboard here. One of the primary ways it moves around is by people moving wood around. Right. So if somebody does take down an oak, we should have something in there that the wood does not leave the property. Mm. So they need to dispose of it on site, whatever means that is. Okay. Just to help prevent further spread.
just think it's important to acknowledge, this is Jennifer, to acknowledge that cannabis farmers are also land stewards, and farming is a part of being a land steward, and nobody desires to go out and take down acres of ancient oak trees.
All right, so we have no motion made. Let's go ahead and open it up to public inputs in the room first, and then we'll go to Zoom. Go ahead, Tom, and then we'll go to Sarah.
Hi, Tom Linsick. I know we don't have anything in the county, but the good news is that we have a lot of really good standards in other municipalities. And I grew up in the city of Thousand Oaks, and we had this exact same conversation when I was a kid. And this is back in the late 60s, early 70s. We were in an existential crisis. The joke was we were going to rename our city from the city of Thousand Oaks to the city of a few dozen oaks. Right. Because the development, in this case, it was, the baby boom development coming up from LA County and north into Ventura County. And it was development. Trees in the way, my view, cut it down. I need extra parking spaces for my strip mall, cut it down. Put it in the development, cut it down. I want to put in some avocado orchards or some citrus orchards. They're gone. And it became a real crisis. So the city developed a 10-year ordinance, and it's actually the gold standard by which most of the other ordinances in the state use, and it covers many of the things we've already heard around this table. But first and foremost is that, and it looks like the county's done this, is they recognize the oak as being a precious resource worthy of protection by the county, or in this case, the city. The second thing is that the decision to remove or actually even disturb anything within the drip line of a tree has to be for the benefit of the tree or the trees, not for the development, not for the view or anything like that. It's for the benefit of the trees. Now, when this came up, there was a lot of wringing of hands, gnashing of teeth, and how is this going to work and how are we going to have development? But the fact is, they were able to do it. They worked around it. They made it work. And today, the city of Thousand Oaks, year after year after year, it gets awards for being the best planned city. They're very proud of their oaks. They renamed my middle school to Los Cerritos because it's the Little Oaks. Things like replacement of trees, seedlings and saplings won't cut it. They require 25-gallon trees or trees in box nurseries with certified nurseries so that you don't have the transmission of disease. They have to be of a certain diameter. The applicant has to put up a bond to make sure that they're providing good stewardship for those trees. The tree, when it is put in, you need a permit and tag. Anything over, I want to say 2 inches from them is considered a tree that has to be looked at and protected. And it is larger than just, strip mall development or orchard. It covers an oak management policy for the municipality, which is what you guys have been discussing. It's very just cannabis, goes into larger ag, goes into all sorts of development. And they cover things like fire mitigation. Like if the tree has to be cut down because the fireman needs to cut it down to save the house, that's fine. If a tree has to be pruned, there are ordinances around what the guidelines are, which you can and can't prune. You can't prune live tissue. You can remove under the drip line.
So we can go ahead and pull that up then. Yeah,
yes, it's online, and it is basically the standard by which, because it was the first, it was before the EPA even existed that they came up with this in early 72, I believe. And every county from San Diego County all the way to Mendocino in some form or fashion is using this as a model for a comprehensive oak tree management plan.
Thank you.
But you don't cut it down unless you can show that it's for the benefit of the tree or the neighboring trees, like a diseased tree, for example, or a tree that is imminently going to collapse and knock out other trees, which happened on my property. But one tree dominoed and knocked another down. You can make an argument for that. But for development, the main thing was, you know, most of the, whether it's cannabis or not, most businesses are going to be gone in 5 years. Small businesses, the stats are, you know, 5 years, half of them are gone. By 10, 15 years, 90% of them are gone. Tree, as the gentleman over there mentioned, they're irreplaceable. They've been here for centuries. Well, it's still there.
Thanks, Tom. Let's go on to Sarah.
Sarah Wagner, consultant. I've worked on many projects that have gone through the discretionary use permit process in many counties. And I want to speak in favor of the County of Lake treating an oak management plan holistically for the entire county and not beginning with the cannabis industry. I think it's the will of this Board of Supervisors to not create exceptional policy for cannabis, and they've communicated that many times, that they'd like to look at things that affect the whole county in a way with an eye on the whole county. For example, the smoking rules that they put forward recently, which will impact cannabis, but also look at all smoking everywhere. And I think this is the most appropriate approach, because when we're looking at impacts on the land, we should look at all kinds of development. And we should keep in mind that cannabis cultivation is actually contributing towards open space protection. It's one of the most regulated and rigorously assessed forms of development, and it should fit into the larger approach to development for the County of Lake overall that considers all of the different factors. On the cannabis farms that I've worked on here in Lake, I've seen some of the most astonishing oak trees that I've ever seen in my life. And I think Jen's right that cannabis farmers and other farmers are usually looking at how you can protect and preserve trees to every extent possible, and then also run a viable business. I wanted to speak a little bit about placement, because I think it like Will said, it's easy to say that you can just avoid a tree, but when we're looking at developing a parcel, you're looking at minimizing the overall impact, and a number of setbacks and ecosystem restrictions on where you can be within proximity to property lines, waterways, and also look at, you know, road development. And we look at 4290 and everything else, where that cultivation or that development may go has to look at minimizing the impact on the overall land. And that's why we have the discretionary use permit process in place. The whole idea is that there's no free pass. There's no just like, I'm going to grow these plants and here's my application. You have to go through the most rigorous level of county review, which is the major use permit. And in my experience of moving projects forward through the Planning Commission, in no way is this just up to the subject to the interpretation of the planner. It's the thing that the Planning Commission, water and trees are the things that consistently get the most attention and the most thoughtful input. So whereas this language may read as a little bit flexible, I would argue that it is not overly permissive, and it gives the authority for site-specific review, which is how we should look at ecosystems. But there's not a blanket rule about don't cut anything down or don't do that, because that might not be the best and highest use of this property, and it may not protect the other resources of the property well. So I think that, you know, two things. I would say we need an overall oak management strategy. And in the meantime, what we could do in this ordinance is include a couple of BMP's best management practices that do give planners some standardization, so we're not reinventing it every time. For example, the ratio. I have had all kinds of different ratios come up. You know, some they're looking at this and like, oh God, we're feeling like we need 7 trees per one today. And actually, it's way more important the quality of care that you give to each seedling than how many you plant, because quantity over quantity can get worse results. So I think standardizing what's our mitigation plan, what are other standards like that combine with the area plans or minimum canopy percentage for that. Those I think would be extremely helpful as guidelines, and then let the county come up with an overall plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public input? Go ahead, Margot.
Margot Kambara. I agree with Sarah's recommendation that we as a county should have a comprehensive oak preservation policy. And I agree with what Rebecca said, that yeah, it should all fall on ag. It should be all encompass all development. I'd also like to remind us what we saw in Donna's presentation. She showed us that a lot of what Redbud Audubon and Sierra Club's recommendation covers, it reflects Lake County priorities and values. The County Board of Supervisors in May 2022 passed a proclamation of a local state of emergency due to pervasive tree mortality. And on July 9th, the board renewed that emergency proclamation. And doing so, the supervisors, they're reinforcing the county's Vision 2028 priorities. And those are the well-being of residents, economic development, public safety, disaster preparedness, prevention, and recovery. If you're thinking, how is disaster preparedness, prevention, and recovery factored in with trees? Well, trees contribute to our well-being in the fire safety aspect. If we have a very strong policy to protect trees and oaks in particular, that also reflects the community vision described in the Lake County Parks, Recreation, and Trails Master Plan draft that was just distributed this year. I think it was just 2 months ago. And that emphasizes Lake County Parks as a regional destination for outdoor activity. And again, it all circles back to economic development, that it's just not nice to have trees. Trees also make us look like an attractive visitors mecca. So to wrap up, the county's proclamation of a local state of emergency due to pervasive tree mortality, it calls for state and federal support because the response needed to respond to this local emergency will, quote, likely extend beyond the capacity of the public safety services, personnel, equipment, and facilities of the county, end quote. So in light of that pervasive tree mortality emergency, the removal of healthy trees is a bad luck. If we can prevent it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public input in the room? Just a quick check. We have about 11 more minutes.
I'm right.
I can send you the links to those.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any hands raised in Zoom?
Here it is.
Go ahead, Holly, in just a moment. Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi, Holly Harris. I agree with it, being an overall policy with all development, but I would also like to see, because Redbud and Sierra Club are more experts in this particular, in this county, I guess I would say. I would like to see them submit a bullet point list of written recommendations to give to the task force for the next meeting too. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised? Okay. Great. So bringing it back to the task force. It makes very good sense that it be a countywide oak policy. We just need to decide what y'all want to do with this section that's in the ordinance.
I would like some language that says something in lieu of countywide or interim until we have a countywide policy that projects are subject to the local area plans. And should there not be one, what do we do then? Is there any area that doesn't have one?
So let's check it.
Yeah. Tulsa Cobb and Lower Lake have, it's more related to landscaping. It says mature trees shall be retained wherever possible for the most part throughout those three. And then there's also riparian habitat removal language and street tree stuff. So not particularly.
Rebecca Harper. I think along Jen's same train of thought, perhaps we could not amend the language at all and or include an amended statement that says, unless otherwise unless otherwise specified by county tree management policy or something like that. That way, I mean, this is, as Sarah mentioned, not as permissive as it seems. So maybe this will hold us over until the county is able to establish a more holistic policy, and then we don't have to rewrite this again, or if they do establish a countywide policy, it would be strange to have area plan language in here instead of that, so we wouldn't have to revise this as well.
You could refer to general plan and or local area plan guidance as the leading recommendation. That way it would be covered.
But as Catherine mentioned, we don't know if tree removal will be covered in the general plan, correct? So then that would be a maybe.
It could very well end up being that preservation of trees is a priority, and then it ends up with goals and objectives for the future to develop an oak ordinance, but there will not be an oak ordinance coming out of Lake County 2050 itself.
So out of caution, maybe we can move to move this to next week's agenda and next meeting's agenda and see what Tom's information has.
If you like, I can present it.
Or it could be sent out for us to review.
And the other area plans as well.
We will have results on that as well. I don't want to make Michelle scramble. But yeah, we'll have that added to the packet. Okay, I'm looking for nods or any other input from task force. So my understanding, just so we're all clear, is that we'll table this item to our next meeting. In the meantime, we'll be looking for the City of Thousand Oaks, as well as Poly Napa, and maybe any other jurisdiction that we find that has an oak policy, an oak preservation policy. And we will just add that to the packet for the review of the task force and consider this discussion at our next meeting.
Maybe also see what other cannabis production counties have as well.
If you have something and you wouldn't mind sending it,
I can do that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, so thank you. There's a general call. If anybody in the Zoom room from the public or our task force has other examples that you wouldn't mind sending us, we would be happy to add that into the packet. Maybe the top 5.
Just a quick thing. So I will go ahead and send it to you, but I have links on Sacramento County as an oak preservation.
Cool. Send them over.
Yeah.
We'll include it. Thank you. All right. Was there anything else that we're doing? Just tabling. Okay. We have 5 minutes. I don't know if we can tackle water use in 5 minutes. I want to thank Donna so much from the Red Bud Audubon Society for putting that presentation together. And I can tell you practiced it like a lot because you had the times and everything. So I really appreciate all the effort that it took you to get that ready. Was there anything else? Let's go, if it's okay with the task force, we will move on to public comments in case there are any. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm sorry, I was a few minutes late into the background check discussion, and this is related, but it's actually a separate topic, which is that as over the years, the current background check policy has been interpreted very differently for use permits that have gone forward, and doesn't necessarily reflect as applicants come forward before the commission today. Doesn't reflect what's currently written in the ordinance, which is perhaps a little vague, and that's why this group sought to clarify it more. And I'm wondering if we could standardize pending projects to reflect the policy that this group has recommended to go forward in the new ordinance, so we don't see it all over the map with what's required. And that's, you don't have to answer that, but that's a question related to CDD.
Our normal process is to stick to the ordinance.
But it doesn't currently.
Well, it's going to, but we don't want to, but one of the unfortunate things about having such turnover in leadership, especially the 3 years before I got back, when we didn't have experienced planners on staff and we didn't have directors who were planners from California on staff, it did get a much wider variation. You know, you're more likely to be susceptible to sway to the moving pressures of the day when you don't have that grounding of experience. And so now we have it, and we're being very careful in how we move and not And we're keeping our interpretations to stuff that we can defend based on the code and the general plan. So I don't know that we're going to change inter-office policies or interpretations just based on what the task force says. But we can talk about it. There have been some forms that, you know, we've already updated or things like that, because it's just obvious that this, oh yeah, that's a better thing. We hadn't really been doing it that way, so let's figure it out. I don't know that we're going to interpret code all that differently, but you're welcome to present the options.
Yeah, and I think specifically like what over time, what the conditions of the use permits have come to say is that all farm labor contractors are subject to background checks, which deviates from the current ordinance and where we want to go. And so I think that I think, you know, I'm going to encourage everyone in the industry to push back on that a little bit, because it has been some scope creep that's not defensible under policy. And I think it reflects, you know, some really good thinking why we came up with what we did.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if any permittee has a concern about their conditions, they're always free to contact the department. We'll get it figured out.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other public input? Looks like we have Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
Well, hi there. Two short things. In the minutes in 422, staff had suggested that they would provide documentation on hydrology requirements prior to upcoming discussions, and I haven't seen that yet. So I was hoping that that could be included in the upcoming packet. And then secondly, I did send in a request to have a more robust discussion on the annual reports and compliance inspections. I did submit some comments on that, but I also had a list that went with it that was not included in the packet. I think this would also be important since in the grand jury report, one of the sections under cannabis said the board should increase oversight to inspect cannabis operations more closely. So this would be a good way to go back into taking a look at the annual reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. So since we're going to jump into water use, hopefully next meeting, we'll take a look at that. Thank you for that reminder, Holly, and look at the requirements that we currently have for hydrology reports and bring that to the task force for your information. Sarah.
Yeah, one more comment. On page 56, I had submitted in writing a request that we agendize a discussion of the farmland protection zone, which we didn't cover in the overall zoning because it's not technically a zone. And so in a future meeting, I'd like to ask that this task force take up a discussion specifically about overlay zoning called farmland protection.
We don't want to forget that, that's for sure. Let's get through our general development standards, and then as we choose next steps, I was thinking we'll start doing the development standards for the recommendations that you guys sent to the board last year, but we want to make sure we don't lose track of that too.
It's kind of an oddball, it doesn't fit in any category squarely. And I know we have a lot to cover through the end of the year, and so you know, we're happy as the industry to prepare some talking points and stuff. We know when it's going to be agendized so that when we come, we can have like maybe more full information to consider, and that things don't have to get pushed to future meetings as often.
That sounds good to me. Excellent. So we'll work out that more forecasting of our agenda and make sure that you have plenty of time to prepare. Is there any further stuff? No, if not, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.